Have you ever experienced something so eerie that it made you question reality itself? That moment when the hairs on your neck stand up and you wonder if the world you've always known is truly what it seems. If you've ever had a creepy encounter that made you doubt the fabric of your existence, you're not alone. In fact, some of the stories I'm about to share will make you wonder if we're all part of a glitch in the Matrix. One of the most bizarre experiences came from a couple who noticed a woman showing up everywhere they went. And I mean everywhere. It started out innocent enough. A grocery store visit here, a Starbucks run there. But after a while, it became downright unsettling. The same woman would appear at the grocery store, Starbucks, the mall, and even behind them in line at the movie theater. Coincidence? Maybe. But the creepiest moment? One day, while driving on the freeway, the wife looked over at the car next to them and let out a scream. You guessed it. It was her. The same strange woman who seemed to be haunting them in broad daylight. She was always alone, never said a word, but always made eye contact. The woman's appearance was just as strange as the frequency with which they encountered her. Tall, thin, with unusually tight skin, she had an alien-like quality that made them joke about being studied by extraterrestrials. And what explanation could there be? Insurance fraud? Not a chance. They had no claims, no reason to be followed. It was as if this eerie woman was everywhere and nowhere at once. A glitch, a ghost, or something else entirely? Now, that's not the only unsettling story out there. In another spine-chilling tale, someone woke up to see their long-deceased grandfather standing at the door, staring at them in silence. You can imagine the terror that gripped their chest, freezing them in place. Before they could react, a flash of light, and he was gone. The most unnerving part? Their mother confirmed that the grandfather would often wake their grandmother by knocking on windows or doors after he had passed away. So, was this a final goodbye? Or something more sinister? Even more chilling, the same person experienced a similar encounter with their great-grandmother. At just 7 years old, they woke up to see her near their bedroom door, wrapped in a bright blue cardigan. It seemed normal at first. She often visited in the evenings. But when she walked over to the bed, embraced them gently, and they fell back asleep, something felt off. The next morning, their parents received a call that their great-grandmother had passed away the night before while wearing that very same blue cardigan. Coincidence? Or perhaps something otherworldly? And if you think that's eerie, wait until you hear this next one. Have you ever dreamed something that felt too real, only for it to happen later? Like seeing a flash of your future, moments that unfold exactly as you dreamt them. One person experienced this repeatedly throughout their childhood. They'd have dreams where they'd be in normal, everyday settings, like sitting in a classroom, only to realize months later that they had dreamed about it long before it happened. Deja vu, or premonition? One particular incident stands out. They dreamt of sitting in a new biology class, noting the specific scratches on the black lab table. When the first day of class arrived, the exact scene from their dream played out down to the scratches. These dreams started to fade as they got older, but one last dream has haunted them since. In this dream, they found themselves kneeling in an empty house, looking into a cabinet under the sink. They're still waiting for that scene to become real, wondering if it's just a matter of time. Now, let's shift to something even more bizarre: auditory hallucinations. Picture this. You're driving down a desolate, dark road at night, sleep-deprived and on a caffeine-fueled high after drinking a couple of energy drinks. The silence of the road is interrupted by a whisper. You try to shake it off, thinking maybe it's just static from the radio. But then it grows louder, more distinct. The voice urges, Turn here. Your GPS, however, says to keep going straight. Heart racing, you crank up the radio, drowning out the whispers, and continue on. Was it just a combination of sleep deprivation and too much caffeine? Perhaps. But the thought of hearing a disembodied voice, especially one telling you where to go, is enough to make anyone question their sanity. And speaking of strange encounters, one person shared a story about a peculiar visit that has haunted them ever since. It was an ordinary day when a white car pulled into their driveway. A woman, likely in her 50s or 60s, stepped out, accompanied by a young girl around 9 or 10 years old. What should have been a routine moment quickly turned strange when the woman and girl approached the door with unnervingly big smiles. The woman asked, "Are you Baggy Raccoon?" Taken aback, the homeowner confirmed, wondering what this was about. The woman then mentioned visiting a neighbor's house first, where they were supposedly directed to this house. But here's where it gets odd. The neighbor later swore they never told the woman this person's name. Even stranger, the woman claimed she and the girl were there to see a dentist, in a small rural neighborhood with no dentist offices nearby. To this day, the person can't shake the eerie feeling that they were supposed to know the girl, as if it were some long-lost connection or message that never quite made sense. A forgotten memory? A strange twist of fate? Or something more supernatural? The stories get even weirder. Imagine waking up, going through your morning routine, making breakfast, getting dressed, starting your day, only to realize that you're still in bed. You dreamed the entire thing so vividly that it felt real, down to the taste of breakfast. This kind of dream within a dream can be deeply disorienting, leaving you questioning where reality begins and ends. And it doesn't stop there. Some people have seen death itself. One individual described driving past a field at night and spotting a figure cloaked in black, leaning on a scythe, watching them drive by. Days later, they were in a horrific car crash that left them temporarily dead. Could they have seen a warning sign, a harbinger of doom? Whatever it was, it has stuck with them since. Lastly, there's the unnerving phenomenon of lost time. Imagine driving on a long road trip. Everything seems normal. You check the clock. It's about 30 minutes into your drive. Then, suddenly, it's 3 hours later, and you're still an hour and a half from home, with no memory of stopping or pulling over. Your gas gauge and GPS confirm you've only traveled a short distance, yet hours have passed. What happened during that missing time? Could it be aliens, a glitch in reality, or something else entirely? These are the kinds of experiences that make you wonder if what we perceive as normal is merely the surface of something far more complex. So what about you? Have you ever encountered something that made you question your reality? If so, you're not alone. And maybe we're all part of something much larger than we can comprehend. Before I hit the freeway, I lived off base, and I often wondered if I actually stopped at stop signs or just zipped right through them. I lived about 30 minutes from base, and it wasn't unusual to zone out while driving. It's like your brain goes into autopilot, saving energy for the things that matter. I had this dream once. It was dark and rainy, and I found myself walking through the woods toward a campfire. There were 3 strange men sitting around it, and one of them wore a shirt and pants with big black and white stripes, like a prisoner's outfit. Oddly enough, I wasn't scared at all in the dream. Fast forward 10 months. I was out hunting and camping with friends when one of them brought along 3 guys I'd never met. I needed to use the bathroom, which was just a 50-gallon drum with a seat on it. My husband walked with me since it was dark, and just as we were heading back, it started to rain. We reached a clearing and saw those 3 guys around the fire, one of them in that same striped outfit from my dream. I wasn't afraid then because my husband was right behind me. I just couldn't see him. No one believes me, but I remember this camping trip I took with my family when I was a kid. On the first night, we heard rustling nearby. My dad went to check it out and came back saying he found an old, dirty sleeping bag surrounded by trash. I thought maybe a bear had ransacked a campsite. For the next few nights, we heard strange noises in the trees, which freaked me out. On the last night, I had a nightmare about a bear getting into my tent and licking my feet. When I woke up, I shined my watch light and saw the wrinkled face of an old man. He was sucking on my toes. As soon as we locked eyes, he bolted out of my tent. To this day, I still wonder if it was real or just my imagination. I've shared this before, but I think it fits here too. Near my hometown, there was an infrequently used hiking trail along the Niagara Escarpment, with climbable cliffs and shallow caves. When I was about 19 or 20, I went with some friends, and we discovered a cave we had never seen before. We decided to explore it without flashlights since cell phones didn't really have flashlight features back then. Inside, it was 20 to 30 degrees cooler than outside, and the cave was surprisingly clean, unlike most caves littered with trash. After a short while, we felt uneasy, like we were being poked and pulled, but we couldn't see who or what was doing it because it was so dark. We used lighters to light up our surroundings and convinced ourselves that one of us was playing tricks. After a few minutes, we decided to leave, but when we stepped outside, it was dusk. We lost almost 3 hours in that cave. We went back with flashlights the next week, but we could never find that cave again. I work as a teaching assistant in my college's anatomy class, which takes place in the cadaver lab. Late one night, I was there alone when I heard a strange noise. It was a muffled sound coming from a plastic body bag that contained an extra body because we had one more than we had storage for. I stood there terrified, thinking this body might be coming back to life. After a minute of debating whether to open the bag, the noise suddenly stopped. I quickly gathered my things and left. A couple of weeks later, the professor warned me to be careful with that body because it had a live pacemaker inside. It would vibrate and beep when the battery was low. I was so relieved we weren't haunted. In my first year of college, I lived in a shared apartment on campus. One night, around 2 a.m., my phone started playing a song by itself. I closed the app, but it happened a couple more times. I thought it was just my phone acting weird until one of my roommates said the exact same thing happened to her. A few days later, I woke up to a beeping sound coming from my phone. When I checked, it was a sound recording that showed 0.00 seconds long. I deleted it immediately. Another time, my roommate and I were watching a movie until 3 a.m. After it ended, she went to bed, but a few minutes later, she burst into my room asking what I was doing. I was just lying in bed reading. She said she heard weird noises from the window, thinking I was trying to scare her. We opened the window, but everything outside was still. I don't have that same phone or those roommates anymore, but it still gives me chills. When I was around 9, I was playing with our dog in the living room. We were throwing a toy, and at one point, it bounced into the kitchen. Just then, my mom walked in with the dog on a leash after a 2-hour walk at the beach. I couldn't explain how I had been playing with him for at least 15 minutes before that. It felt like my imagination, but I just can't shake the feeling that it was real. A few years ago, I experienced sleep paralysis while dreaming. I was talking to a friend, but suddenly I realized I was dreaming, and that person wasn't really my friend. Their face turned dark, and I felt them pushing me down in bed. I couldn't move or breathe. Just then, my cat jumped on me as if to protect me, and the dark figure vanished. When I woke up, I noticed red marks on my shoulders, where I felt it was holding me down. 6 times in my life, I've come home to find that I locked the door, but when I put my key in, it opened like someone was expecting me. It's happened at my mom's houses and others too. I was helping a friend move, and when we came back with more stuff, I ran to the front door, and it opened, even though he said he locked it. I'd like to think of it as a superpower. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night, needing to use the bathroom. From my top bunk, I could see down the hallway to the bathroom. But as I was about to climb down, I heard and felt footsteps of a man going into the bathroom. I thought it was my dad, but that was strange since he had his own bathroom. He didn't turn on the light or close the door. I got annoyed and called out to him, but there was no answer. When I finally climbed down and switched on the light, I found the bathroom empty. I clearly heard the footsteps and felt the vibrations of a man walking down the hall. It was the freakiest thing I ever experienced. Another time, I woke up to heavy breathing, feeling watched. I couldn't move at first, but when I managed to call my dog's name, he didn't come. I found him in the kitchen doorway, just staring ahead. I called him again from right behind him, and he barely turned to look at me before going back to his trance. I later found out that my experience was probably sleep paralysis, but I still wonder about my dog. When I was about 12 and still living with my parents, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. As I walked to the bathroom, I heard what sounded like a party happening downstairs. There was laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. I thought it was strange that my parents had friends over so late without telling me, so I decided to go check it out. I opened the door to the kitchen, but to my surprise, the entire downstairs was dark and silent. Not even a TV was on. I was really confused, but the weirdness didn't hit me until later, so I never mentioned it to anyone. Years later, I told my dad about it, and he said he had heard the same sounds. It turns out that our house, over 150 years old, used to be a small public bar. I guess some of the old patrons decided to stick around. In college, I hung out with a big group of friends, about 10 of us. We always went to lunch together at the cafeteria across campus. To get there, we had to walk through an atrium with bushes lining the path. One day, as we were walking in pairs, the first group passed through the bushes and kept going. But when my group stepped between the bushes, we all suddenly stopped, feeling this overwhelming sense of unease wash over us. We felt disoriented and realized that one person was missing, but we couldn't remember who. We checked, and everyone was accounted for, but we all insisted there was someone else. When we caught up with the first group and asked them about it, they had no idea what we were talking about. It was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. I believe in the supernatural, but I usually approach it skeptically. That same area had another weird event. A lamppost just appeared overnight. None of us remembered seeing it before, and we walked that way every day. After that day, we started taking a longer route to avoid the area. I steered clear of it like the plague. Years ago, when I was about 17, I came home from school feeling sick. I spent the day lying on the couch, and by 8 o'clock, I felt worse and decided to try to sleep it off. I crawled into bed and fell asleep quickly. I don't know how long I slept, but I suddenly woke up in my dark room, feeling weak and terrified. My body felt like it was on fire, and the room was spinning. I looked over the edge of my bed and saw my grandmother, who had passed away just a few months earlier, sitting there. She gently patted my arm and said, "It's going to be okay. Just call for your dad." So, I started calling for my dad, and it felt like forever until he burst through the door, asking what was wrong. When I looked back, my grandmother was gone. My dad took me to the ER, where I had a fever of 106 degrees, which explained a lot. I received fluids and a shot in my hip, and eventually, I started feeling better. Even though I know she wasn't really there, it felt so real that it messed with my head a little. I loved her so much, and her sudden death was hard for me. We kept her ashes in a beautiful urn at home under a painting she had made. When I got home and passed by it, I said thank you to her. I know it was just the fever and probably some sleep paralysis, but it made me question the afterlife. As a kid, I used to have vivid dreams that eventually faded away until they stopped in my early 20s. The last dream I had was about the death of someone I loved dearly. The very next day, they drowned. That hit me so hard that I think something just switched off in my brain, and I stopped having those dreams. But I still trust my intuition a lot in different situations. I thought I was crazy for thinking this. So thanks to whoever shared their experiences, it makes me feel less alone. One of my most vivid dreams was about a balloon plane flying all over the place. I looked up and saw a tarot-like card with the angel Gabriel on it. The next day, I got a surprise text from my best friend saying he had just gotten off a plane that had terrible turbulence, which made him sick. His name is Gabriel, and I didn't even know he was traveling that night.